After a rudderless 3 weeks in the U.S. House of Representatives, a seismic shift.
Let the enemies of freedom around the world hear us loud and clear. The People's House is back in business.
Mike Johnson, with unanimous Republican support, will usher in a new era as House Speaker. He's not exactly a household name, but he has exactly what the most conservative bloc of the GOP wants.
And the swamp is on the run. MAGA is ascendant.
A so-called Speaker of the MAGA movement in one of the most powerful positions in Washington. And save for when Donald Trump himself was president, never before has the Republican far right been able to operate at peak power in the House quite like this.
This is Donald Trump's party. The Republican Party now is a MAGA party.
Tonight, for the first time in U.S. history, the House has voted to oust the Speaker, Kevin McCarthy, brought down by a handful of hard-right members of his own party.
That was the moment the Republicans in the House were plunged into chaos. No Speaker meant Congress was paralyzed. They tried to find a replacement, going from candidate to candidate, but factions within the Republican Party wanted different things. Moderate Steve Scalise couldn't rally the right. Head of the pro-Trump Freedom Caucus, Jim Jordan, couldn't capture the moderates, and so it went back and forth. Tom Emmer was the party's third failed candidate. Trump himself would take credit for that.
Was it MAGA? Most people are MAGA in the Republican Party, so I disagreed with him on a lot of things over the years, and I assume it had a big impact.
And by the bitter end, after 22 days, more than a dozen candidates and 4 official votes on the floor, this.
The House of Representatives has, after 3 weeks of legislative paralysis, elected a new Speaker of the House of Representatives. His name? Mike Johnson of Louisiana.
Mike Johnson. If you hadn't heard of him before, you're certainly not alone. He was basically a nobody until now.
A lot of senators over the last couple of days were saying, Mike who? Or I'm not familiar with him, or let me Google him.
He sailed through in just one round of voting.
The 51-year-old former radio talk host and attorney moved into the Speaker's office.
We went through a lot to get here, but we are ready to govern.
But why him where everyone else failed? It turns out that spending most of his career under the radar is exactly what made him the man for the moment.
The funny thing about Mike Johnson, like, he is a MAGA guy, he's a Trump guy, but he's a MAGA guy, Trump guy who nobody had ever heard of. And that's actually the beauty of how he got picked Speaker.
More and more, the hard-right faction of the Republican Party, which is maybe 40 to 50 members, has become increasingly influential within the party. The Republican majority in the House is too small for them not to have a say at the table. And Johnson has hard-right credentials. He's voted against more aid for Ukraine, a divisive issue for Republicans. He's opposed abortion rights. He's an ally of Donald Trump and voted against certifying the 2020 election results.
We have very aligned perspectives on a vast majority of issues, so this is our guy.
But here's the important part. He has none of the baggage that, say, one of the previous candidates and firebrand Jim Jordan had.
Now, Johnson's somebody who's figured out that you can get a lot farther being very conservative if you do it with an even tone of voice and looking like a friendly accountant who lives down the block.
If you don't think that moving from Kevin McCarthy to MAGA Mike Johnson shows the ascendance of this movement and where the power in the Republican Party truly lies, then you're not paying attention.
So it's safe to say the MAGA wing of the Republican Party sees this as a huge win, not just because of what it symbolizes, but because the House Speaker is one of the most important roles in U.S. politics, maybe even as important as the president, at least from a legislative perspective.
The Speaker is in charge of the legislative calendar, of what gets voted on, and importantly, what does not get voted on. So it's tremendously powerful and tremendously influential role.
The only way to change Washington is to change who's leading Washington, and that is what we did today.
Johnson is a staunch conservative who will likely move the House's center of gravity firmly to the right. and he now has the power to make or break President Biden's agenda and spearhead not just his party's biggest legislative initiatives, but specifically those things that the far-right elements of the party see as most important.
In terms of policy, he is about as far to the right as you're going to find in the House caucus, and still have somebody who's trying to be an actual legislator.
So, what does he do with that power? Johnson landed an early, easy win on day one, passing a resolution condemning Hamas and expressing support for Israel, with overwhelming support.
The world is on fire. We stand with our ally, Israel.
The move was largely symbolic, a chance to show the world that government was finally working again, but there are much bigger challenges ahead.
I mean, we know that divisions have grown wider and deeper among Republican lawmakers.
One of his first orders of business, money for Ukraine.
Well, I'm all for helping Ukraine. I just don't think it should be the American taxpayer continue to give and give and give.
There has been a real evolution in how Republicans think the U.S. should respond since the war in Ukraine began, going from, yes, let's support our ally, to maybe we're in too deep.
You have folks who are foursquare against any more aid to Ukraine. You have folks who want money for Israel, but not for Ukraine. You have folks who would prefer to see the U.S. be not involved at all in overseas conflicts like this. And so, he's got to figure out a path forward that will keep all of these groups happy.
There are big domestic issues on the docket as well.
Mexico border is intensifying as Texas towns along the Rio Grande expect a large influx of migrants over the next few days.
And for MAGA Republicans, this isn't just about funding. It's about changing policy, asylum rules, looking at concrete measures to limit the number of migrants coming into the U.S.
Why has this administration rolled back immigration policies that have a proven track record to secure the southern border?
Then there's the looming government shutdown, that recurring deadline where Congress needs to agree on how to fund government spending or else risk a complete shutdown. GOP hardliners don't want more debt. And in Johnson, they will have a sympathetic ear.
People like me have never voted to bankrupt our country.
Underpinning all of this, of course, is the seemingly impossible challenge of actually uniting the Republican Party once the actual business of lawmaking begins.
If Mike Johnson steps a toe out of line, Matt and the Chaos Caucus are coming for him. And I think he knows that.
Because the very same rule which allowed a very small group of very frustrated Republicans to kick out the previous speaker, that rule is still in place. Meaning, at any time, any Republican can call a vote to potentially start all of this all over again.